Bah! Hello!
Bah!
Boo!
Good
So
evening.
I can turn off my camera and then turn it on and be like peekaboo, peekaboo.
Okay. Feel like kind of like, ooh.
Yeah, it's Abra, Narwhal, and Jason, and we're here. This might be the third, is it, or maybe even the fourth? We've kind of
Third.
been doing, we've been discussing this show behind the scenes, doing it about monthly. And this week, it's Moon Knight 2. Jason proposed it to us, and it's funny because when you pitched it too, I was like, Moon Knight 2. I'm like, what is that? And like someone in the chat was like that. There's a Moon Knight 2. I'm like, what is even Moon Knight 1? I don't even know what that is really. That's how I'm a little green on Moon Knight. I was reading it and I was like, he's basically like Batman.
I never knew anything about Moon Knight except from when I played Dice Masters. I had, a Moon Knight character, and I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. And it had the little moon shape, but I never read the comic. I wasn't familiar with him. And then they came out with that horrible Disney Plus show or whatever. I didn't watch it, so I guess I can't say it's horrible or not. But with what's his name, Oscar Isaac. And so this was a great introduction.
That fell down the memory hole, that show.
Yeah.
A lot of Disney stuff does.
Oh yeah, dear Lord.
So Moon Knight was created to be an enemy for Werewolf by Night. So when the Comics Code got relaxed in the 70s and they could do monster comics again, they had one of the monster comics in addition to like Tomb of Dracula was Werewolf by Night. And so they said, okay, we've got the werewolf as a protagonist. Who's a good adversary? Well, obviously you get the full moon, and then you've got the fact that he's got silver weapons. So they said, okay, if you're going to go out for werewolf, you got silver weapons. So Moon Knight was created as an adversary for Werewolf by Night. And then Doug Mensch and Bill Sienkiewicz started doing him as a backup feature in this Hulk title. And then it kind of grew on, it took on a life of its own. And like you said, he is kind of Marvel's Batman, but his twist is that he's got the split personalities and so forth. So Moon Knight is one of those characters where in the right hands it's fantastic, in the wrong hands it's not Batman.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and so this is, and Abra mentioned too that we can't help but compare because Jason's kind of curating the book. So it was Salome and now it's Moon Knight, and we're getting a cool glimpse into like I don't know what the word is, but it's like the form of comics. It's like what's possible. It's like some of it could be considered a little more artsy fartsy even, but in like a good way.
That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah. And so I did not expect that, but I suspected because you suggested it. I was like, all right, there's something about this. And I was like, oh.
You knew it had to be good.
Yeah, I mean, it's a single comic issue, and it does stand alone as like a short story, but then it also stands out in like some of these like storytelling form kind of ways where it's playing with the comics medium. Jason, do you want to talk anything?
Yeah. So when we go through this, let's just go through the first like 8 pages kind of slowly, and then we'll talk more about it. But I definitely picked this one. I recommended it rather because this is an example of something that I think you can only do in comics, right? So Narwhal, do you have the ability to zoom out like a little bit so we can see like the 8 panels?
Oh yeah, actually,
I love what they did with this too.
I will be able to do that, but give me 1 minute.
Okay, no problem.
Because I'll download it and open it. And
this is Warren Ellis's run. I think it was 2015, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around there. Mm-hmm. So this is a great run. It was like 6 issues when they rebooted Moon Knight. It's a great run for many reasons, but one of them is that it's a sequence of standalone stories. And I highly recommend reading all 6 of them. Each one is kind of a one and done. And there's some similarities, but it was unique because in an era when, everything was in the style of Brian Michael Bendis, where it was stretching a story out over 6 issues and just killing people that way. These were nice, sweet, tidy, one and done stories, standalone. It was a remarkable series in that regard.
Cool.
So the first page starts out. You see, you can tell it's kind of like the end of the day in this skyscraper, this bank in like downtown Manhattan or whatever. And these various characters who, you don't even know if they're related to each other, they're beginning to wind down and end their day. So there's 8 people to begin with here. And they're just kind of tidying up their affairs at the end of the day. Some of them are in a good mood. Some are in a bad mood. Some are dealing with personal issues and so forth. And then we scroll to the very bottom there, and you see that the 8th person has been shot. They've been shot by a
Yeah.
sniper.
And I want to add too, like, so you're giving the story, but with this comic too, it's confusing, but in like a good way. Like the first page is very disorienting, and you don't
Yeah.
know what's going on, and you do put it together by the time you get to page 8. But that's part of the process.
Yeah, it did take a couple pages. I'm like, what in the world?
Yeah, and
And-
I realized you could go back and actually read it in order for the panels. Like this guy up here, I can go to his second panel down and get a little continuation of the story.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
way.
The eight different characters on the comic page maintain their anchor position in the 8 panel grid, and their story is sliced out, like you said. So that's kind of something that you can really only do in a comic book. In a movie, you can do jump cuts, but this is definitely unique. So then we move on to page 2, and the first thing you're going to see is that the person that was shot, there's a void. It's white, it's gone, and to some extent it's the symbolism of they're gone, their story's ended, there's a void. And you might even imagine that their loved ones have a void now too, right? So they're gone. So you got the remaining 7 people, and they're continuing to kind of wind up their affairs and move towards the exits and the skyscraper. And there we are, the person in panel 5, pow, shot. So clearly there's somebody who's taking these people out. At this point, you because of the lighting, you can tell from the storytelling that they're telling you they're kind of ending their day or whatever, but you don't know if these are different time zones. You don't know, the lighting is different. You're going to find out later what's going on, but the fifth person has been shot.
Yeah, this is done so well.
And this in contrast to this panel, because I did look at this panel and I see the black blobs, and I was like, is that like the Venom symbiote, or is that blood?
That's frame matter.
Because you're like, it's the Marvel universe. What is it? Is it
yeah. But that's again, like, I actually like that it's confusing, because then you get your question answered in conjunction with the second one. You're like, oh, it was blood. So yeah, we can settle that. And then sure enough here, like it is like more dramatic. He's picking moments in time to draw at different blood splatter moments or whatever. So
now person number 2 has been shot, and then again there's a void.
Yep, 2 voids now. Yeah,
I didn't put that together until you just said it, that as they die, then it becomes a void. So that especially can't be done as a movie. Like, because I did think there is a movie where it deliberately starts and there's plenty, but there's a couple where one, I can't even name a few, but there's one, it's called Assault on Precinct 13 by John Carpenter.
Yep. Is that with Ethan Hawke?
Yeah, they got remade, but then there's the original, and I think they both do this, but they follow 3 or even 4 plots, and they have nothing to do with each other. And you're kind of like, why am I watching this? And you're wondering that. And then they all come together at the precinct at the time when it starts to get under siege by the gang. And so that's like a cool thing. And then there's Ichi the Killer too. Starts like, it just starts like, it's just showing you everything all at once, and you don't even know what the hell's happening. And it takes like 20 minutes of being confused before you start to, like, basically playing catch up, and then you can put it together. But those movies can't even do like this with
there's no way.
And spoiler alert, if you haven't watched The Sopranos, stop right now. At the end of The Sopranos, there's something similar to this, where the story just ends. And door rings,
and then nothing.
Exactly. Yeah. So in movies this has been done, but again, with the beauty of the comic page is you have this, you have that void persisting, and so it's not the experience of, usually in an action adventure movie, somebody's shot, that go down, and there's people around there, them screaming and going, get help. This is just, it's nothingness.
Yeah. Cool. Namadon says, not a bot. Thanks for telling us, Namadon. I appreciate that on this channel.
Cute avatar, by the way.
Yeah, that's the best avatar too. Richard Kale says you could do it with split screen. That's similar. It's funny though, split screen, like 9 times out of 10, I don't like it in movies because you don't know where to look or whatever. But and that's what's cool about comics, is the page is right there, and you can take your time, the interactivity of like looking at the work and then turning the page. But yeah, that's true. And again, there's one example of split screen that's super amazing, and it's in Jackie Brown by Quentin Tarantino. I don't know if you guys remember that one, but it's like doing split screen to reveal, she leaves the dude and she goes to her apartment, and the other guy drives off, and it stays with him, and you don't know why it's staying with him. And then it follows her, and then the bad guy is in her apartment, and he's being nice to her, but he's not supposed to be there. And I mean, by being nice to her, is he hasn't killed her yet. He's just talking. But the idea is he's probably going to kill her because she's a witness to this thing. So he has to, and he's asking her what she told the cops and stuff. And then it kind of builds, and you're still watching the other guy's just driving, and so you're like, okay, he's just driving. And then Samuel L. Jackson's the bad guy. He starts to put his arms around Jackie, and he's gonna choke her. He is gonna kill her. But then you see on the other split screen, the guy goes for his gun in his glove compartment, and it's not there. And then on this screen, you see Jackie has the gun, and she says, "Back up, motherfucker!" It's like so badass. It's so cool.
That's
and
a
it is
great
that
movie.
is like,
Yeah.
yeah, it is like very cool, very like interactive of the way they play off each other. And this is a little bit like that. So that at its best can achieve some of this kind of stuff for sure. So yeah, we can keep going down a few more pages here. And yeah, it's giving a clue to a third plot with these in the void.
Yeah. And so Abra, when you read the narration that's in the void, in the white panels, when you read those, were you familiar with Moon Knight's backstory at all?
Not at all. Not at all. This makes me want to know his story.
So another thing that's going on with this is that so Moon Knight, his origin is that he was a mercenary. Mark Spector was a jerk. He was a gun for hire mercenary, and he was on an expedition in Egypt to do some bad deeds, and he got shot during the Soldier of Fortune things they were doing, and his team left him to die. So as you're reading this, there's a part of your brain that's like, is this Moon Knight talking? Is this Moon Knight getting revenge on the people that double crossed him X years ago when he became Moon Knight? Because he was left for dead in the desert, like kind of crawled through the desert and found this pyramid, and Khonshu, the god of the night, said, "Okay, I'm going to spare your life if you'll be my servant."
Oh, wow.
And that's kind of his origin. So there's the first time you're reading this, you're saying, those of you that are connected to Moon Knight, like, wait, is this Moon Knight? Is he finally getting revenge on that old troop he was with? But more to be seen as we read through this year.
The first time I read it, I actually because I got a trial of Comixology, and so I did it in the format where it just jumps from panel to panel. And it felt as we go later on in the story, and they have the action scenes, it made those action scenes stand out a lot. But I think it took a little bit away from. I mean, obviously, you don't get the whole impact of the void there. So when I went to read it, in traditional format, looking at the page, then I was like, oh, okay, now I see what they're doing here, and it made more sense.
That's funny. That's something your boy Zach says. He hates Comixology.
Yeah.
he just buys them on Comixology, so he can't get struck or whatever by pirating or whatever. Yep. And then he downloads the PDF somewhere.
I like it when he shows that he shows that here, I bought it. Okay, now I'm gonna go to the Russian Russian PDF site. And then on the topic of Comixology, shameless plug. Jupiter Zero is available on Comixology, which is a collection, a curated collection of my 90s Jupiter.
Oh, nice.
So it's the stuff that like 3 years ago I looked at it and I said, okay, I don't feel this doesn't make me cringe. I'll release this on Comixology. So it's not the entire 90s Jupiter. It's just the stuff that I thought was good enough to re-release.
Yeah. Cool. I'll have to check it out. Sure.
I want to check that out. Hey, real quick, have you guys heard of Rex Mundi from the
Yes,
Image book?
Arvid. Yep.
Yeah, Arvid is in CG, and I was like, dude, I didn't know because I'm not well versed, but I was like, that's like a big old comic series, so that's kind of cool. I want to check that out sometime.
Do you know, is that available on Comixology or no?
No, well, it might be, but I know he's bummed because it's out of print and there is a demand for it, but it's still just not even happening.
eBay, it's like $70 a pop on eBay. It's crazy. Wow. So
yeah, so it gets expensive, and it's like that is unfortunate when there's a demand, but then it can't. People won't reprint it. You're like, come on. Yeah, and one thing too, I kind of like that develops a little bit is I start to figure out a little bit what's going on, and then I do kind of wonder, like, these two are the last two, and I'm like, is he going to kill the girl? Is he going to kill the black guy? And the answer is yes, they do die. I'm like, oh. So, yeah. So this is like part one is this like artsy fartsy thing kind of that's like pretty cool, setting up everything. You see the girl doesn't make it either, and then the last guy, and then you get the title screen, which is cool.
Sniper. So, and then the fourth panel there, you see the street where you see the different people that have come out the different doors, and so this is all happening at the end of the day at this bank, and you can see the bodies there on the ground there. So all these different viewpoints. This was all people leaving from that same building, whether it be elevator, stairs, etc. And the sniper has done his business.
Yeah, and then part two of because this is the halfway point basically, is like a Batman fight scene, and it is pretty good in its own right. Pretty fun.
Yeah, very little dialogue, but the action's done really well. And I thought that some of the panels weren't really all that detailed, but the way that everything's posed, it made it very interesting to look at. Every page was just very interesting.
Yeah, there was a handful of panels I really liked.
Yeah,
where I was like
him running up on the bad guy, firing off the grappling hook and everything, shooting out the window in the other building. Just very dynamic.
Yeah, I like this shorthand for
for
like the chord being before
it, and then you can kind of hear it.
You really can.
Yeah, and he uses it there too. Yeah, and actually, as I'm looking at this too, this is cool that the angle is almost identical because is very readable for the action.
Yeah.
If it wasn't identical, it wouldn't quite translate. So anytime like the clarity, the more clear the better, because that kind of affects the reading experience too. So
you get exactly interesting like perspectives and everything too. A lot of people today want to do like these just looking almost like everything's a cover shot or something. And this, you really feel the action, you feel drawn into the page. I thought it was really well done. And again, like I said, that maybe some of the proportions aren't exactly right, or like the details, aren't, it's not as detailed as it could be, but it's just done so well. It's very, pleasing to the eye.
Yeah.
I think
the white for his cape here.
Great layouts, great fight choreography, good communication of action and so forth. But it's not Mike Deodato, right? It's not it's fun to think about if they had handed this script to someone like Mike Deodato, what would it have looked like, right? And maybe the fight scene would have looked more like pinup art, would have looked cool, as it were. But I don't know if it would have like the energy, and I don't know how he would have handled the first part when the sniper's taking the people out. But it's fun sometimes to think about a story like this and say, if you had given this to a different artist, would it have worked? What would it have looked like?
Yeah. What can you tell us a little bit more about Moon Knight? Like, what is even, you mentioned he has the multiple personalities, because I didn't even really know that. I was going to say my history, because Abra mentioned hers. I think I collected the trading cards back in the day, and the Spider-Man, etc., and I had a few Moon Knights, and I did
mine was just from Dice Masters. That's the only, I had like a little description on a card.
Yeah.
So back in the early 70s, late 80s, the idea was there's a guy named Mark Spector who was a total jerk, right? He, like I said, he's on the verge of death, gets rescued by Khonshu. And because I think Khonshu gives him a bunch of gold or whatever from the pyramid or whatever, he sets himself up to be like a Batman, where he's got these alter egos. He's got Stephen Grant, who's this playboy millionaire guy, and that allows him to circulate in the boardrooms, lets him circulate at the country clubs and look for criminals. And then he's also got this personality of a cabbie. So he's got like a blue collar angle. So basically he starts out as three aliases. And then when he uncovers, when he goes after either a crime syndicate or a bad guy or whatever, by using these different personalities or these different personas, he'll close in on the bad guy and take him out. Later on, other writers said, okay, well, because he's doing that, he's getting split personalities, which I'm not a fan of necessarily. Now, I am okay with the idea that because he's possessed by Khonshu, maybe that does make him crazy. But I'm not a big fan of the idea that he starts out with split personalities. But he's got these different aliases, and the more modern Moon Knight stories, it could be like an SGW neurodivergent thing or whatever. They try to play up, or they keep getting, the only stories they seem to be able to tell are stories where he's conflicted about his split personality, which to me isn't the interesting part. The interesting part is the fact that he can circulate in these different circles. So a lot of Moon Knight stories are hit or miss. The Warren Ellis series here, he doesn't get too much into this identity crisis stuff. Goes more with the good storytelling and so forth. The Jeff Lemire run Jeff Lemire followed him on this run. That's where it really went over the deep end into the split personality and the identity crisis. And it's like, dude, I don't read comic books to go through to vicariously go through somebody's therapy sessions.
Yeah.
I read comic books for escapism and show me something cool that you can only do in a comic book. So
does he have superpowers in the sense that I see the guy, wound him a couple times, but he's like, why can't I hit you? Why can't you stay down? Like, does he heal, or what happens with that?
So because he was a mercenary, he's good at all kinds of martial arts and combat and all kinds of weapons and so forth. And then because he's got a part of his alias is that millionaire. He's got the money of like a Batman. I think Khonshu might help him with healing or something to that effect. But I don't think he's got any like superpowers. But I could be wrong.
A lot of it, I think, is his cape confusing people or whatever, like being a big shape, and if you shoot him, you just hit the space between them or whatever.
I like how they use the cape a lot too. The contrasting colors. It was that was cool to look at as well.
Yeah. Daylight says, who's the artist? Is Declan Chevley. You guys may remember he's run afoul of Comicsgate here and there, but I remember I was telling Jason, I think he's categorized not as an SJW, but he is categorized as a coward. Like, he's one of more of those guys. Like, he kind of almost agrees with us, but he would never say it, and blah blah blah.
It's a shame.
He'll admit that he'll admit that the big two comic book industry is now like 5% of the market, but he won't speculate as to why.
Yeah, because he knows he'll get kicked out or whatever. But yeah, so that's cool. Oh, here's one that, again, with that shorthand for the kind of animation, it's cool.
And then the sound effect could be a lot stronger there, just
yeah, and you can kind of feel it, or
because it's going through and it's just knocking the guy through the door.
And that reminds me, because I back in the day, I think Rorschach in The Watchmen, I think he shot some cop with his hook gun. So I've always, kind of like we think about how much that's got to hurt, all that force. So yeah, that guy's in some real pain there. Mm-hmm. So now he spills the beans. He starts explaining his motive.
Yeah, and the motive mirrors a little bit of Moon Knight's. Like in the beginning, like when you're like, it could be Moon Knight, but you're like, no, it's just this guy.
Elbow to the top of the head, that would hurt.
Yeah, it's kind of like a gnarly fight. And Moon Knight does get like wrecked a little bit, but he takes him out.
And I think kudos to the colorist too, because
I was just gonna say that. Oh my God, read my mind.
Because again, there's not like a lot of dialogue, right?
Right.
And in terms of giving you a sense of place, and then kind of, and obviously the way they handled the coloring of, basically they said, hey, we're just gonna not color Moon Knight, make his silver cape that white of the page. That kind of then it draws your eye, it directs your eye, it informs the action and the fight choreography, but just the subtlety of the coloring, where it feels like what it's supposed to feel like, the dark part of an office building in Manhattan or what have you.
Yeah.
Can you tell what they use to color it? I mean, is it like marker or something? Because in some of the panels, it looks like you see the tip of a marker or something like that in the shadowing.
I don't know, but I see what you're seeing in terms of it adds a certain kind of texture,
Yeah, I
And
really
certain
like
kind of
it.
richness.
I wonder if that's Declan Chevley turning in black and white pages, and then that becomes a shade on the color, maybe. But also it could be the colorist doing it. Yeah, real quick to F in the chat, talking about the gun with the cable shooting out.
Yeah.
I guess with the way we say we can hear it, that sound wave could be a subliminal thing, and that's kind of cool. But explaining the shorthand of like, because this I have seen this before, and I think it is like the functionality of how these things sort of work, like a grappling gun. It's like they have to shoot out the slack at the same time that they shoot out the leading heavy device, and then the slack gets pulled up really fast. So a kind of way to draw that is you got to draw the slack and then you draw the device or
It
whatever.
almost looks like a sound wave.
Yep.
Yeah. It's like a cool invention, because that is like that's like iconic, as in like Declan Chevley's not the only guy who does that. Like a lot of people draw these kind of whatever it's called, grappling hooks that way when they shoot them. Kind of a universal thing.
And at the beginning, he mentioned there were 9 people on the team, and here we saw the 8 people get assassinated by the sniper. This man is the ninth guy, and he's got a bit of soliloquy to drop on Moon Knight here.
Yeah, nice. Oops, sorry, Abra. I accidentally.
It's all good.
Yeah. F in the chat says, "Oh, it's a cable." That's all I needed to say. And then Richie says, "LMAO." So yeah, this is kind of the format for this show is pick Jason's the most of the arbiter or whatever, but because you have the most knowledge, but finding these kind of gem comic books that explore, you could kind of phrase it like the form of comics or whatever, some interesting things that comics can do. And this was a great example of it. And it is kind of inspiring. It's fun to think of like, and it's funny that Moon Knight formatted as a series of short stories that does end up being like a time where, yes, you could almost, because it is almost like the story is secondary to the format a little bit. Like he almost had the idea like, or at least they're hand in hand kind of. He's like, oh, following 8 people in a building, the idea for the format might have come first, and then the idea for the story came second. And that works with short stories. You can't do that with longer stories a lot of times.
Well, I was quite impressed with this one. It's like as soon as I was done reading it, I wanted to go back through and look at it again.
Nice.
Yeah. And and Jeff Lemire dropped the ball too. He's another coward. He's even more anti-Comicsgate in the tweets once in a while, but
it's a shame. Just happy, fun people wanting to read comics,
Yeah. Speaking of like their kind of more obsession with the neurodivergent stuff, you know who does that a lot is Tom King too. He kind of focuses on all the wrong stuff.
Yeah, that's another one where it's like, dude, first off, you're CIA. Second of all, I don't need to sit in on your psychotherapy. Go work out your issues. I don't need you to wreck these IPs so you can work through your issues. So just go. Basically, he didn't want to go write a novel that no one would read, so he shoehorned his way into DC, and now he's dragging all these characters.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah,
he's forcing it upon the reading public, because many kind of feel like they have to read it because it's Batman or whatever.
He's no Tom Clancy.
Yeah. If you're going to come from that world, you could deliver the goods, but no, you got to write sad sacks. That's funny.
So I those of you that are watching, if you enjoy this, I recommend this whole Warren Ellis run. It was like 6 issues. They're all good in their own way. They're all good one and dones. And in an era where Marvel and DC were trying to get you to buy 6 issues to tell one story, you've got Warren Ellis here showing us all how it's done, where you tell 6 different stories in 6 issues, and you get people the money's worth.
Yeah. And now, so I get Warren Ellis mixed up with a few of those like older Scotsmen or whatever.
The Garth Ennis thing where it's like,
Yeah.
which one is
Yeah.
it?
Seriously. So is Warren Ellis, was he writing for Castlevania on Netflix?
Yeah.
That was,
Yep.
and he got canceled by Whammon.
Yeah,
in
for
92?
for grooming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, Cecil did a fantastic when the Warren Ellis thing broke. Cecil did a beautiful pick apart of the whole thing, and it was hilarious because Cecil took it from guys. This is how you do it. Warren Ellis.
Yeah.
Warren Ellis had a method, he had a rhythm, he had
Yeah.
a spiel, and he worked it, and he knew it was you need to stay on message, cast a wide net to bring in the babes. It was
Yeah,
it was
he
it was
has
just
the hot
wonderful.
takes for sure.
Yeah. No, yeah, like one of the things of like the allegations against Warren Ellis was like a woman regretting her tattoo because she had like tattooed his name on her boob or something. And it's like that's not his fault. That's your
Yeah,
fault.
seriously. Somebody hold a gun to her head.
Yeah.
It got
Um,
it got pretty ridiculous. And those people can go. If you want to go down that rabbit hole, I say go seek out the Cecil episode because he covers the content of the allegations, but he does it with an impish angle, and it's very very funny. But again,
Very Cecil.
and everything was consensual, and the thing is, if we're gonna have a free society, people in their 30s are going to regret decisions they made in their 20s. So that's just the way it is, and you can't should not be destroying somebody's career because you regret your decisions in your 20s and 30s. So that's my hot take.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people grow, people change, people's views change. I mean, I don't know. It's madness.
Yeah. What's Warren Ellis like? Give us a little mini intro on him too, Jason.
So I subscribe to his newsletter. He sends out a like an email newsletter like twice a week, once every 2 weeks, called Orbital Operations. His most important works, in my opinion, are like The Authority and Planetary. So on my bookshelf back here, I've got the Planetary Omnibus, and that was like 30 some issues that he did with John Cassaday. And the Planetary takes place in the DC universe, and it started as a Wildstorms title, but the premise of Planetary is, what if the Fantastic Four were villains, and to counter them, this organization was built up to fight the Fantastic Four and all of the threats that were tangential to an evil Fantastic Four. And you don't realize it until you're about 3/4 of the way through the series, and suddenly your brain goes, oh, this is the Fantastic Four they're fighting, right? So I have read Planetary like 3 times. I highly recommend it. And then obviously The Authority's in the news. He did the first like 12 issues of The Authority with Brian Hitch, and then they passed the baton to Mark Millar and Frank Quitely. So that's a title there. And then because I'm live, I can't remember all the other wonderful titles that Warren Ellis wrote. He wrote Red, which was turned into a movie with Bruce Willis and so forth. So I'm sure those of you out there in the chat know more Warren Ellis off the top of your tongue than I do right now. I'm a little bit off my game, but yeah, go check out Warren Ellis. Almost everything I don't think I've ever regretted reading a Warren Ellis story. So go check them out.
And as far as the Garth Ennis mix up, Garth Ennis wrote The Boys, right?
The Boys, yep.
Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so he's like the more edgelordy Scotsman.
Yeah, so Garth Ennis wants to write war stories. He wants to write like a gritty like Joe Kubert war stories, but he's mad because comic book readers don't want to read war stories. So Garth Ennis finds any way he can to write books that will sell, and then when he can, he writes war stories. Now that he's done The Boys, I'm sure he's not hurting for money anymore. Mm-hmm. But that's how I tell them apart. I think Warren Ellis genuinely loves comic books. Garth Ennis does not like comic book fans. I think that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool. Cool. So we discussed too, because this is a shorter comic, we aren't going to drag it out, but let's hang out behind the scenes a little bit, you guys.
Sure.
But it's not like we're going to end it just this second, but we're going to start winding down. But one thing we can discuss a little bit too is even like what are some other books that we should maybe do?
Mm.
We could brainstorm, or Jason, if you have any
Yeah.
others you've thought about.
So I've got a list. I've picked the first three. So something I'd like to throw out there is if you're in the chat and there's a book where if there's a one and done comic that just enthralled you, or it used the medium of comic book storytelling in a way that like you could only do it as a comic book, throw it in the chat as a suggestion and we can take a look at that. And put it in the hat for a future episode. So look for wonderful one and dones, gems that people have overlooked, unsung heroes, and then again stories that you could only do as a comic book.
Yeah, because it is kind of expanding the mind, and it is fun to read comics where anytime, because it's kind of rare, but I'll get the feeling sometimes I'm like, oh, this is better than a movie, or this is better than like a video game, or like in the comics, it's like the best, but only once in a while. But it's these little mind blowing moments when you'll be reading something and you're like, oh, this is so cool. But I guess I remember even the age of edgelord stuff. Like I kind of think it's like 2012 or 2008 to 2012. That blew my mind. Like that's like The Boys. Like the first time I read The Boys, it blew my mind in a good way. I was like, oh, you can't find this anywhere. This is crazy. They talk like so much. They say shit or whatever. They swear. I don't know. They talk about sex and swear, and they're superheroes. It's crazy. But it's like, yeah, comics did that before anyone else could.
Yeah.
And then now it's a show, so people kind of take it for granted. But that's kind of part of the fun of what comics can do. And it is like creating that voice and writing the dialogue. You can still do that. You can still kind of get a fresh voice out there with comics better than any other medium, kind of. So yeah. Do you guys have anything? Well, while we're still live, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I got that in.
I'm in Minnesota. So I'm next door to Canada. I can't tell you what the heck's going on in Canada. Canada's going crazy. But I can't explain it. So I know there's been crazy news about Canada this week. I can't help you with that, but I can tell you with certainty that Grokken is wonderful. I read the first 2 issues of Grokken, and this is kind of psychedelic sword and sorcery. Highly recommend. I loved Kenneth's work on the Ultimates at Marvel, and even his run in the New 52, his run on Superman. He had like 6 issues of Superman. It was like almost the only thing good out of the New 52. I highly recommend Grokken if you haven't picked it up yet. And I'm looking forward to when he launches a campaign for issue 3.
Yeah, that's the next one I'm going to do a review on.
Nice, cool. Me too. Grokken's great. One of the shining examples of crowdfund comics being like, obviously in that case, like, so much better than mainstream, but cool.
It looks like Dale A might have a few suggestions there.
Let's see him.
Only a Poor Old Man by Carl Barks. Oh, that reminds me, I have some books that are like, I have like some Will Eisner stuff, and there's one other guy who's like from that era that did like these. And I'll mention him to you guys too, but we could do Will Eisner sometime. His stuff's awesome, obviously. And he did like, I didn't know what to expect reading Will Eisner too, because everyone just says like, well, for one, the Eisners are named after him, and then he did The Spirit. But then when you read his like graphic novels, they are actually like novels. Like they're like about people living lives and trying to keep their job and get food for their family, or if they're like on hard times or whatever. And I'm like, oh, it's like a Russian novel, but it's a comic.
War and Peace.
Yeah. Amazing Screw on Head by Mike Mignola. I've seen that animation.
I've heard good things about that.
I like the title.
Yeah. I would love to read that one, actually. That would be cool. It's fun. The other thing about comics is how much can you pack into, because this is a 21-page one, Moon Knight, and it does feel like a short story, but Salome almost didn't feel like a short story. It felt like a full course meal, kind of.
Yeah, it did.
And that was 32 pages. And that was still, kind of a short story, but that was like very filling and cool.
I have a question about that. Your character in Hotel Story, which is launching on Sunday, did you have a character called Salome? Did you borrow from that, or was that just a coincidence?
I noticed that. Yeah, I noticed that. Like, hey, what's going on here?
I know that was independent, but so Jared named her at some point during the writing process, and I think he Googled, like cool witch names or cool
Yeah.
historical names for women or whatever, and he picked Salome. And we didn't know how to pronounce it for a while. I still don't know if we're pronouncing it right, but because you could say Salome. And when
Yeah.
we hired voice actors, the voice actress was like, "So is it pronounced Salome or Salome?" And we're like,
Yeah. Go for it.
Salome.
Yes.
So we've been going with that.
That's some
Oh,
cool
but then it was funny
synchronicity.
too. Then she kept saying Salome, and we're like, "No, you're putting the wrong emphasis on the wrong
Yeah, the wrong
syllable."
Salami? What?
Yeah. But yeah, it is a good. I hope she gets fan art because she's a cool character. I think she will, and I might even like work it behind the scenes. I'll go to Hype Wizard, be like, "Hey, can you draw some Salome fan art for the campaign?"
Yeah.
Nice.
F in the chat is like Salome is correct or
Yeah.
whatever.
I saw that. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah. So I was gonna say one, going over books that we've backed, that's fun to do too. So maybe we'll do because we've been doing these monthly. So the next one
Mhm.
we'll have a new fun book to share. And then if there's time, we'll share what we've been backing and reading from within
yeah.
crowdfund too. Because there's a lot of fun stuff even there that's kind of pushing the envelope a little bit. And then yeah. So yeah, and then
There you go.
Grand Prix, and then my new book launches Sunday. Hotel Story does, so sign up, mods, if you want to post a link. I actually didn't put it in the description this time. And Jupiter is in demand. Is that on From My Comic or? Cool.
Jupiter's on Fun My Comic and Indiegogo still, and I'm very close. I'm a few backers away from hitting 8,800 on and Indiegogo. So
Nice.
those of you out there that have been seeing this book floating around, go check it out. Go check out the Indiegogo page and please back. I'm actively working on issue 2, so stay tuned for more previews.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, 8,800 is a good numbers. That's cool. And it's out there. You can back it and get it fast and everything.
Yep. In demand, order ship the following day. So no waiting on this one. It's all printed and ready to go.
Sweet. And then Abra, you're still building your channel in cool ways. I see new videos and shorts almost
Yeah,
week.
trying to try new things. I just put one up today. I found this old movie. I'd never heard of it before, with Robert Redford, called The Electric Horseman. And I saw the picture of it. It was on streaming. I'm like, this looks so weird. I read the description. I'm like, well, I like Redford. I'll give it a shot. It was actually a really heartfelt movie. I really enjoyed it. Great, scenery and everything. Good story. Wholesome. You don't get too many of those anymore, but really good.
Cool. I haven't seen that one, so that recommendation makes me want to check it out.
Yeah,
you know what?
sure.
Actually, on the flip side of the spectrum, I was avoiding Terrifier. Have you guys heard of that?
No.
It's kind of famous horror movie and then Terrifier 2 came out, but everyone was talking about it in the horror community. But they're all saying like, dude, it's so gory. You're just gonna love it. It's like torture all the way through.
Like Saw.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not that interested in that, but I do like horror movies. I'll follow. And then I saw someone else randomly, a channel I like. She's like, this is not like Terrifier. Terrifier is like a lot of fun. And I was like, okay, maybe I do need to just check it out. And because that one's on Tubi. So I threw that on a little bit last night. I didn't finish it. I fell asleep, but I'll finish it tonight probably. But I was going to say, it's funny. Terrifier, it actually had a really fun story. So it's a horror movie with a fun story. But the fun story is 2 girls going home from a party and they end up getting stalked by a serial killer, and then kind of trying to avoid him and survive him for the whole night. Like it's like so simple, but then within that, there's like a lot of fun things that happen of the back and forth and how they're kind of trying to stay alive and stuff. And I was like, sometimes you can tell a pretty long, fun, like that's a feature-length movie where the story is like one sentence, but you filling it up with these fun details.
I miss a good slasher. Like back in the 90s, early 2000s, they had some pretty hokey ones, but they were fun,
Yeah. Yeah, you know what one I think fondly on still, and I rewatched it and it holds up, but it depends what mood you're in, is Scream. Scream
Yeah.
is
Oh, yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I love about Scream the most is I love the climax and the reveal that it's both dudes and that
Yeah.
they're freaking insane. And the
They
scene where
are.
they have to stab each other is so funny. Like that's such a
Ow!
like, and he accidentally stabs him too deep. Like that is so ridiculous, but like kind of because that's like emotions or like the feeling because it's not scary, it's not funny. Like what is it? It's
Yeah.
super weird. So that alone is kind of cool about that movie.
One of the greatest scenes in all horror movie, in my opinion, one of the greatest scenes in all time in horror movie is I think it was a Friday the 13th where Jason takes Manhattan, where the boat goes into Manhattan, and what happens is once the teenagers realize that he's on the boat, that there's a killer on the boat, they say, okay, gather all the weapons together, put them in a pile, right? So they get all the weapons together, and this guy goes, okay. He goes, you pick first, and some guy picks up like a wrench or something like that, and then they go, all right, now you pick a weapon, and the next guy picks up a gun. It's like, wait, no. If you pick first, you're picking the gun. You're not picking a wrench.
Yeah.
And it just was the funniest, like, nonsensical thing I'd ever seen in a horror movie.
Then you're wondering about that guy the whole movie. You're like, this guy,
He's off.
he's 2 cards short of a full deck or whatever. View Ita says Scream was Wes Craven at his peak. There's another Wes Craven movie called The People Under the Stairs. Have you guys heard of that one or seen it?
Yeah, that one.
Is that a remake?
I think it was.
It might have got remade. It's like early 90s. It's a weird era of movies because it's very 90s kind of. But that movie is like awesome. It's super. That's another one super weird. It's almost you're like, does this make sense even? But you because it's like kind of like a fairy tale, but then kind of not. And I don't know. But it's cool. It's rated R fairy tale if it is, but it's in the the hood kind of or whatever, like rundown Detroit even or something. Like it might actually
Little Black Riding Hood.
Yeah. The before it was Malin, there was People Under the Stairs. Yeah. Cool. Well, with that, so now I'm thinking about ending it here in like just a few seconds. So chat, thank you everyone. Sub Abra on YouTube. Check out Jupiter, still in demand, Indiegogo for my comic. Get ready to sign up for the launch and sign up for the mailing list for Hotel Story, which launches on Sunday. And to you two, thanks for hanging out. Hang out just a second behind the scene too. We'll say hi. But because you guys